Welcome, everyone, to Breaking Kayfabe with Bowdren and Barry, episode 8 of our YouTube content. And I hate to be the guy that frames it like this, Barry Rose, but this is a very special edition of Breaking Kayfabe. It's like one of those ABC after school specials when we grew up, a very special. Issue. Is your boy addicted to, meth or something like that? And I see you got your boy Ozzy there with you. And
I am.
it's good that Ozzy's there with you, Barry, because in this particular episode, this is going to be a little challenging for me. I got to be honest with you. This episode not only is it devoted and dedicated to good boys like Ozzy, I'm going to talk about my boy Snap. And as some of you, I think, know, we lost my boy Snap a couple days before Christmas, Barry, and it might have been as painful a situation as I've ever had to deal with in my life. Uh, I know not everyone out there that watches or listens to us or follows us is a dog person. I like to think at the very least, most of the people that follow us are people that, you know, love animals or, don't want to see harm done to animals at the very least. But so today, Barry, we're going to talk about my boy Snap. How's that?
Yeah, it's heartbreaking. I guess it's the reality of knowing that when you get a dog or even a cat, or let's say any animal for the most part, you know that your time with them is going to be limited. And in knowing that, it doesn't lessen the pain one iota. And sadly, we've been friends for so many years that, you know, I've been aware of when you've lost your dogs, and as we were talking, you've had dogs, Jeff, almost your entire life at this point, and it just doesn't get any easier as you're about to talk. And I know that when you lost Gunny, because we do a lot of shtick in a sense. We talk, we goof off a lot. We've always been kind of irreverent, whether we're doing the podcast or this video podcast. But you and I talk off air a couple of times a week at least. We text literally probably almost every day, and I was very much
One
aware.
love, brother. One love.
One love, friends for so many years,
I think at least
uh,
40. At least 40.
at least 40.
That's
But
a
you
private
and
joke.
I, it is a private joke, which is great when you've got an audience of thousands like we have, Jeff. That we just do these private jokes. But I was aware of the pain that you were in, and it's insurmountable. To me, it haunts me. You cried, and when you were telling me, about Gunny, or and I'll let you tell the story of Snap, but uh, I I felt your pain. I felt your pain, and it fucking hurt me. And I understand it, and I think anybody that is a true pet owner understands that. If you love animals, as we were just talking, and so many of our people love animals, and you love animals, it's losing a child, it's losing a brother, it's losing a family member, it is losing arguably at times the closest family member to you. And I've talked about Ozzy for years, and I never realized it, Jeff, but as I was going through my divorce, living in a basement, and we would joke about it, but the reality was Ozzy became my therapy dog. And I can't imagine life without Ozzy, though I know that day will come. Ozzy's 12. He turned 12 in November. So I understand it. I get it. And I think there are a lot of people out there that truly do understand that losing a dog is not, quote unquote, losing a dog. It's not. It's losing your best friend. It's losing the one living, breathing creature on the face of this earth that gives you unconditional love, that loves you more than him himself. So I feel your pain, Jeff, and this is going to be a tough episode to get through.
Yeah. Um, I'm gonna do a lot of stream of consciousness here because there's things that I want to talk about, and I'll sit there. I'll be talking about one particular thing, and I'm like, oh God, that's right. I want to talk about this particular thing. Um, One of the things that Barry and I have talked about since I lost Snap is that as a pet owner, whether it's a dog or a, cat or whatever, one of the things that you should have is, and I talked about this with my daughter. My daughter works as a I always I always try to figure out what her job title is. She basically runs an animal hospital. She's like the director, and so she's very tuned into pet care and all that kind of stuff. And afterwards, when I talked to her about it, and I said, we're going to do this show. What should I tell the people that they need to know? And she said, number one, as a pet owner, and I've talked about this with Barry too. You need to know where the closest 24-hour veterinary care is in your area, wherever you live, because there will come that time, as I dealt with and Kim dealt with on the 21st of December, when you will be like, what the hell am I going to do here? So you need to know where your nearest emergency veterinary hospital or vet is that is open, because our particular vet was open only from 8 to 12 on that particular day. And so we could not contact our vet. And, that led to, so know where your nearest 24-hour animal hospital is. Also, this is something to think about, especially Barry with, that's a good looking boy right there.
Right.
And then there's Barry. So, but you need to prepare yourself for, with Snap weighed about 80 pounds. Okay. He was a bit of a chunky monkey, I have to admit, maybe one or two treats too many. Barry, just ballpark figure, how much does Ozzy weigh?
It's about 90 right now.
Yeah. But when you deal with the inevitability of the loss of your pet, think about this. You have 85 pounds in my case, 90 pounds in Barry's case when that time comes with Ozzy, that you're going to have to deal with who's going to take my animal now. Now, I will tell you, there are facilities out there that provide, whether or not you want to just dispose of your pet, or in the case of what Kim and I have done with our pets, is you get their ashes back. You can get them very simple box. You can get them in a nice urn. There's all kind of different ways you can do it. But when that event happens, you have I'm going to be very blunt here, and I hate to put it in these terms. You have a dead animal on your hands. In our case, lying in our living room. What do we do with this dead animal? And a dead animal that, when you're talking about that much weight, now if you have 10-pound Mr. Snuffleupagus, like it's very simple for you to deal with. But when you have a larger animal like we had, and like that Barry has, going to have eventually, it's very hard to lift that kind of dead weight, especially when you're a friggin' 64-year-old cancer survivor, And so what happened was, that's something to think about. Like, how are you going to dispose of their remains? So let's put that on hold for a second. It was the 21st of December, and my wife and I were sitting in the living room. I had just started watching some football, and believe it or not, I started dozing a little bit. And Kim was about 5 minutes away from going to do her volunteer work at the local Humane Society. Thank God she hadn't gone yet, because I don't even want to talk about what would have happened if she hadn't been there. And my dogs, Barry, I don't know if Ozzy's like this, but when someone shows up at the front door, you had to deliver a UPS package or whatever, my dogs lose their mind. In part because they're dogs, in part because they're protecting their house. They're protecting their owners. And this was a very routine thing, especially it was the holiday season. And seemingly every day we had something, being delivered from Amazon or UPS or the post office or whatever. And so my dogs immediately began barking, "Brr!" And what happens is my boy Roscoe assumes his position on the couch looking out the window. Snap would run to the front door. We have the two rectangular windows that are opposite side of the doors. And that was Snap's spot where he would begin to bark and, let the person know that, yeah, this is not some place you want to mess with. And so I kind of like woke up from my slight doze and I'm like, okay, stop you guys. And all of a sudden, Snappy kind of went down. And I heard Kim say, what did you do? And we have like a place rug right there. And the thought initially was that he had slipped and got himself caught up in the rug and was trying to get himself back up. And so I kind of woke up and Kim walked over to him and she said, I think he's having a seizure. Take Roscoe outside. And so I went and grabbed Roscoe by the collar and started walking him outside. And now let me just say that we've had a dog, our dog Midnight that we had for about 9 or 10 years back in the early 2000s was epileptic. And we saw at least probably 3 or 4 times while we had Midnight where he had a seizure. And Barry, have you ever seen a dog have a seizure?
I don't think I ever have.
So what happened with Midnight is they basically would seize up and they kind of like, like are stiff legged and their eyes are there, but it's like their eyes are there, but nobody's home kind of thing. And
Wow.
it's very scary. And the first time it happened, we were completely wigged out because we didn't know what the hell was going on. And so what happens is he, whimpering a little bit, and I'm talking Midnight here, and then over the course of about 5-10 minutes, he kind of starts gradually coming out of it, and then after about 15 minutes, he's up and he doesn't even know didn't remember what happened. But while you're in there, while you're in the middle of the seizure, and I'm sitting there, stroking him and petting him, petting his face and all that kind of stuff, and then he'd snap himself out of it, and he'd start walking around and playing with our other dog, Beezer. Okay, so now we're back to Snap is having a seizure, and as I go and let Ross go out the back door, and we're talking maybe a distance of 25 feet, maybe. And I hear this little like that. And so I turn around, I come over, and he's laying there and his eyes are open. And I start petting him. And all of a sudden, Kim says words, Barry Rose, that will haunt me for the rest of my life. She says, oh my God, he's not breathing. And she put a call into our daughter. Our daughter didn't answer at first. She put a text to my daughter, said, please call us 911. And we're trying to, do whatever we can to kind of rouse him out of it and explain to my daughter what's going on. And she says, put put the phone up into where I can see what's going on. She's at the animal hospital at that point. And actually, she wasn't at the animal hospital. She was over at her in-laws' house. And so she instructs us on how to do compression on a dog, pressing like you would do on a human. And with a dog, mouth to mouth, as you breathe into their nose. And so we're doing this. So she calls a friend of hers who's a vet who happened to be having breakfast about 10-15 minutes just down the road. So the friend immediately heads over there. Kim and I are doing these compressions. It's completely exhausting to do that, by the way, and you realize what horrible physical condition you're in as you're trying to do these compression exercises. You're, blowing into your dog. We're switching on and off because we're getting tired. And what happens is when you breathe into the dog's nose and then you do chest compression, the dog has a reaction that sounds like when a dog is sleeping and kind of does the, like that kind of thing. And that's what we thought. We thought we were bringing him out of it. And the vet lady shows up and walked over and she says, let me take a look at what's going on. She put her hand on on Snap's chest. She looked at us and she said, "I'm so sorry. This beautiful boy is gone." And when you have one of those screams that just comes from a place that it's from a very deep place, almost like a howl. And I said, "Not again, not again." And I knew my boy was gone. And I cursed and I cried and I went into the bedroom and I sat on our ottoman and cried some more. And Kim came in and we cried. We both cried. And I said, "This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't supposed to happen like this." So let me backtrack now. We lost my boy Gunny a little more than 3.5, almost 3 3/4 years ago. Gunny had cancer. Gunny had a cancerous growth on his leg, and we'd had the surgery, had it removed. But when you have a cancerous growth like that, you pray that it doesn't get into the system. And the doctor said they thought they got it all, and maybe they did. I don't know. But there came that point in time, and we actually, Barry, I don't know if you recall, we did an episode on Gunny and when I
Yeah.
lost Gunny. And it was brutal. I am not ashamed, although I should be, to say that losing Gunny hurt me worse than losing my father. And after having some discussion with my sister and my wife, maybe it was because I wasn't living with my father. My father's death really impacted my sister, but my sister was my father's caregiver. So of course, it impacts you. And you see the pain that my mother went through, losing, her spouse of 70 plus years, 70 plus years. And so when I lost Gunny, and Gunny was so close to me, Gunny was my Ozzy. I'd had Gunny for 12 years. He was my constant companion. He was the guy that when I came in the door, Gunny would sit in my chair and I'd walk in the door and he would be giving me the side glance like this. And then he would run over and he would grab his favorite stuffed animal, which was a stuffed penguin. We, of course, naturally, Barry, stuffed penguin. What are you going to name the stuffed penguin?
Uh,
Pingy, of course. That was the
oh,
stuffed animal. Yeah, it makes sense, right?
I should have
And
known that. Yeah.
yeah, and so when he died, though, um, I got a I got about a 12-hour notice because what happened was Gunny's paws had become enlarged with fluid, and it was a sign that the cancer was returning. And when my wife called my daughter and said, "Hey, what does this mean?" and she talked to a vet, and the vet told her, "Yeah, it's getting ready to happen, and it's not going to be pretty, and he needs to make a decision like toot sweet." And so we had to make the call to put my beautiful boy down that day. And the reason I'm telling you all this is I at least had a few hours to say goodbye. I have this picture that's in my phone that is the last picture I ever took of Gunny and myself. And I look at it, and I really should delete the photo because it's that painful to me. But it was the last photo of me and my boy together. And he looks weak, he looks skinny. He's got the ghost face killer thing going on. And but I can't. I can't delete it. And when I look at that photo, and I don't like to, but when I, scrolling up and I see it and I look at it, I just think how frail he looked, and how just not beaten down because good God knows he was spoiled and pampered just like you spoil and pamper Ozzy, I'm sure. But he looked old. And so I had a chance to say goodbye. They came and did the euthanasia in our home, and which is another. As I said, I'm going to get off track. If you have the ability and you know that time is coming, I highly, highly recommend reaching out and looking into places and facilities in your area that provide home euthanasia. Don't be one of those people that drop your dog or your cat off at a vet and say, I can't deal with this. I'm leaving my animal here and letting them take care of it because I can't handle this. Fuck you if you can't handle it. Man up or woman up and take care of your animal. They depended on you their whole life. Don't you dare fucking betray them. Have the balls and the stones to be with your animal when they take their last breath. I cannot stress that enough, Barry. Have the courage. Have the courage to be the last thing that your animal sees before they say goodbye. They want you to be there. They want to smell you. They want to hear you. They want to feel you rubbing their chest or scratching their head or something like that. That's what they need to have in their last moments. Not for you to leave them on some cold table at the vet so the vet can give them that needle. Did you know, by the way, I just saw this last night, and it's something my daughters reiterated to me, Barry. Do you know that the highest rate of suicides in the medical industry is by veterinary people like vet techs, vet assistants? Because these are people that have to deal with putting animals to sleep on a daily basis. Imagine having to deal with that on a daily basis. Talk about having to do the John Cena routine and go, and just like be able to not get emotionally attached to this animal that you're saying goodbye to because the owner wants to sit out in the lobby or wants to get in their car and go home. No, stay with your friend. Stay with your dog, stay with your cat, stay with whatever, and say goodbye to them if that is what presents itself to you. So we say goodbye to Gunny. Brutal, just brutal. And like I said, it affected me more than losing my own father. And I can tell you, a week would go by, and I would walk into the bedroom, and I'd look at that spot where he would, he would always lay, or we'd always see him in the morning when we got up. And I was just looking at that spot in our bedroom, and I would burst out crying. How could you take my boy away from me? So anyway, we say goodbye to Gunny. A couple weeks go by. We're watching TV, and Kim very randomly starts sending me photos of dogs that are available for adoption. And allow me, again, to go on a brief rant and side note. If you are deciding or thinking about getting a dog or a cat or whatever, I can't stress enough that before you go for some particular breed or I want a this or that, go to an animal shelter. Go to a local humane society. First of all, it's going to be way cheaper than going out and saying, I want to get this particular breed and I'm going to pay $10,000 for this particular breed. You know how much it cost us to get Snap? Like $85. $85, and they give you free immunizations for the rest of the dog's life. I mean, come on, people. What are we doing here? So anyway, getting back to our story. So Kim had sent me these photos. And so I saw, I don't even know if it was him. I saw some pictures of dogs that I thought looked interesting. Kim is one of these people. It's funny, she volunteers for the Humane Society, but she can't go down when it comes time to adopt a dog. She couldn't go down and look at the dogs. And so I went down and I said, let me look at like 3 or 4 dogs. And what they did, and every different Humane Society animal shelter is different. Some have you walk into the facility and you walk past the dogs in their kennel. And guess what? The dogs get all worked up and they start barking and getting excited and stuff like that because there are people that are coming into the facility that they live in and they're excited. Guess what? So the way they did it at the time, which I think is a really good idea, is they would give you a photo album and you go through and it has a picture of the dog and the dog's biography, and you can sit there and say, "Oh, okay, well, this is I'm looking for a male that has short hair." Okay, and I'm looking for one that's like, yeah, maybe 3 years old, not too. It's not a puppy where I got to worry about housebreaking it, but it's also not a an older dog, or it's not a long-haired dog, whatever. So you see what the dog is. They give you a description of the dog's name, age, immunization records, all this kind of stuff. And so I picked out 4 dogs. The first dog I picked out was Snap, who at the time was named Snapdragon. Because they get so many dogs, on intake, they just have to come up with these names. I guess when Snap was born, they were going through Flower Month, Barry. They named him after a flower. I don't even know what a Snapdragon looks like, to be honest with you. But that was his name. And I said, "Yeah, this is a good dog. It's a good-looking dog. Let me meet him." And they have a conference room, and I sit in the conference room, and they bring Snap into me, and runs around a little bit, comes up immediately, showing a little bit of affection. I'm giving him a pat on the head. I'm petting him and stuff like that, and he's showing up and showing out, as they say. And so I look at a couple other dogs that did not seem as interested in me as perhaps Snap was. So I asked the girl, I said, "So what's the story with Snap here?" She says, "Well, he's a year and a half old. He was born here on the day before Christmas. He is a year and a half old." And that's another painful reminder, Barry, is that Snap died 3 days before his birthday. 3 days before Christmas, or 4 days before Christmas. Thank you very much. And so I said, "What's the story?" "Well, he was born here, and he was adopted out as a puppy, and he was returned to us about 6 months later, covered with mange. Some irresponsible asshole had adopted him, had let this skin condition overtake him, because God forbid your dog should have some sort of problem and you choose not to take him to the vet." So they brought it. He came back. Snap was there for almost a year at the Humane Society. And what they would do is in the main lobby, of course, they have a desk, sides all around it. And the staff loved Snap so much, they would bring Snap out to the reception area and he would sit there with the girls, typing in, different information, taking phone calls, all that kind of stuff. And Snap would sit with them. And they all would ask themselves, how has this dog not been adopted yet? It's not a bad dog. It's not an overly, rambunctious dog. Gets along with other dogs. There's no particular, and trust me, as a volunteer, we see dogs. There are dogs that are at the Humane Society now. There's a dog that's like 8 or 9 years old. Number one, he's old. I get that. Number two, reportedly does not get along with other dogs. But when you take him out as a volunteer, this is the best dog ever. My boy Caleb, I don't understand. Barry, by the way, could you lean a little to your left because they can't see you?
Hold on one sec.
There you
Is that
go.
better?
Got to look at
There
that.
you go.
Got to look at that good-looking face.
Yeah.
Uh, but so they couldn't figure out why Snap wasn't adopted. Well, I looked at him and I came home and I told Kim. I said, I think this is the one. This looks like a really good dog. And we brought our girl Molly, who we still had. They did the old meet and greet because you got to make sure your dog and the new dog get along. And they brought him into what they call a bark park. And he and Molly went up to one another, did the sniff test, looked at each other, walked away, started minding their own business. They're like, "Thumbs up, looks like it's good to go." So we adopted my boy Snappy. And I want to say that was October. 3.25 years ago. We brought him home. We made a life with him. And I used to say, because I thought he and Gunny looked a lot alike. And if you look at pictures of Gunny when he was younger, when we first got him, and pictures of Snap, I mean, they look like they could have been brothers, or Gunny could have been his dad. And as a matter of fact, I called him, Snap was Gunny's boy. And when I would talk to Snappy, I'd say, your dad Gunny, he's watching out for you, and he's taking care of you. And Snap had his own personality. He was very protective of me and our home. He, I called him a face biter because when he would try to show you affection, he would jump up, and you would think, to those who didn't know, that he was trying to bite your face. But what he was doing was he was like trying to lip at, give you a kiss, and he would do it. And the other thing he loved to do is he loved to come up on the chair with me and lay across my lap. And that's something I really miss. And I really miss my boy just laying across my lap. And I told people, I said, they asked, people have asked me, well, what do you miss? And I said, I miss his presence. I miss waking up in the morning, going to the bathroom, taking a shower, coming out, and by God, Snap was going to be laying on the end of our bed just waiting for me to come out of the shower. I miss when we would walk him at night. Kim would take Roscoe and I would take Snap, and Snap would go over, do his business. And when he would do his business, sure as hell Roscoe would go over and have to pee on top of Snap's pee because Roscoe wanted to assert a little bit of dominance here and put his scent down on top of a Snap's scent. And every night when we would take him out for the last time, we'd come back in and I'd give him each a treat. I'd give him, piece of little cube of cheese, or I'd give him a little slice of apple. They love watermelon. You give Ozzy watermelon?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and what other fruits or veggies does? I know you have a very specific diet with Ozzy, but does he like stuff like carrots and apples and stuff like that?
Yeah, so I actually eat a lot of apples. I eat a lot of apples with peanut butter, and I share that with Ozzy. Whatever I eat, I basically give to him as long as it's not, something that he's not allowed to have. And doesn't have a finicky diet at all. Ozzy will literally eat anything.
Well, no, when I say that, I mean you prepare, I know, Ozzy's meal for him every day, correct? Like it's not just like you're giving him kibble and dog food. You give him very specific stuff.
So I say this, but for breakfast today, Ozzy had some kibble with a cheese omelet. So yes,
Yeah, dogs love eggs, by the way.
they do.
I can't
And
tell
eggs are
you.
good for dogs. So
Yes,
yes,
the amount of times that Kim and I would come home from having breakfast, and that night for dinner they get some bacon and eggs with their meal or with their kibble.
yeah,
But so anyway, I love that. So when we would come in, Snap would go over by the sink and he would sit down, and it was like so sweet how he would just go there and just patiently wait because he knew he was going to get his before bed snack. And so I would give him an apple or a carrot. He loved carrots too. He and Roscoe both love carrots. And the funny thing is, now that Snappy's gone, Roscoe doesn't like apples anymore. Watermelon, yeah, sometimes carrots, depends. But so we wonder whether or not he was eating those things because Snap was eating those things, you know. And so anyway, he would sometimes he would sleep at the foot of our bed. Sometimes he would come up between us. Sometimes when it rained, there was a lot of thunder. He's very noise sensitive. I always hated 4th of July and New Year's Eve because he was so noise sensitive. And because we sort of live out a little bit in the country, we would have people that would shoot off guns or shoot off fireworks, and it would completely stress him out. It's funny because some dogs, Roscoe, you could let Roscoe outside while fireworks are going off and it doesn't bother him at all. Snap, if Snap hears a car backfire, he immediately would run up the steps to our deck because he didn't want to deal with any kind of noise. And, but so when we would have those thunderstorms or whatever, Snap would come up between us, and then he would eventually crawl up by our headboard on top of the pillow, and he would lay across the top of my head. And I would feel him on top of my head laying there. And it was such a sweet memory that my boy, when he was scared, would seek me out. He would come to me when he was scared and wanted to sit on my lap when it was, if it was thundering during the day, because he knew that I was going to protect him. But I knew if somebody came to that door unannounced, he was going to protect me. That was the deal that we had. I would say, I protect you, you protect me. We take care of one another. So getting back to that day, so now we've lost Snap. I'm angry at anything and everyone. I'm a spiritual person, Barry. You know that. I'm not overly religious, but I'm spiritual. I was angry at God that day for taking my boy from me. My sister is very religious, and I talked to my sister about it. And I said, I'm sorry, you may not want to hear this, but I was angry at God for taking my boy away. And she goes, why wouldn't you be? Of course you would be. My sister understood. It's funny. I remember I worked with a guy in the courthouse years and years ago who was I guess what they call in religious circles a lay reader. He was very active in his church. I don't know if he was technically a quote unquote pastor or a reverend, but so one day I was talking to him about dogs, and I said, and I think I'd maybe just lost my first dog, Lady. Wasn't too far after that. And I said, do you believe dogs go to heaven? And he looked at me, serious as a heart attack, and said, no, I don't. Animals are not allowed in heaven. And I was like, wow, way to break it to me gently. Well, so anyway, a few years go by, and I'm talking to my good friend, Brother Jeff Steele, who is a minister, and I said, let me ask you a question, Brother Jeff. I said, do you believe all dogs go to heaven? And I told him the story about what had happened with the other guy. And he said, as a minister and a pastor, there is probably not a question I get asked more often than that by people. Think about that. This guy's a minister. What's the number one question he gets asked as a minister when someone comes to him for counseling? Whether it's grief or just, seeking some mental health help. What's the number one question this pastor gets asked? Do dogs go to heaven? Or do animals go to heaven? So I said, well, do they? He said, he goes, here's the way I answer that question. I can't imagine God, if he's a loving God, not wanting something that loves you and that you love that much not to be there with you. And you know what? I was like, that's a good answer. That's an answer I can live with. As opposed to no. So, anyway, my boy Snap, taken from me after not even 3.5 years. I'm angry, I'm hurt. Trying to deal with my loss. And, Kim and I would talk about it and we would start crying. I talked to Kelly. And, one night I started thinking about it. And I said, my dog Lady, Godberry, it's been going on almost 40 years now. She was very old. I found her at a pool, in our pool. I'd like to think that she maybe had a heart attack or something and fell in the pool because she never went in the pool. But that's how I found her. Brutal. Brutal. My ex wife and I had our dog Misty. And when we got divorced, she, of course, kept Misty. And I
Remember
got the
Misty?
call. What's that?
I remember Misty.
Yeah, she was a good dog. Aussie Shepherd. Beautiful girl.
Yep. Yep.
And my wife called me, or my ex wife called me one day and said, just want to let you know she's gone. The only problem I had was I'd ask her, if you're getting ready to put her down, please let me come see her and let me say goodbye to her. Let her smell me one more time. She didn't, but she was nice enough to call me and let me know that she was gone. And then when it came to, my boy Beezer left for work one day, and Andy called me. I hadn't even been to work a half an hour. And he goes, I think something's wrong with Beezer. I think he might be dead. And I rushed back home, and Beezer had passed away. And Beezer was an old dog, starting to have hip dysplasia. Again, older dog. Lady, older dog. Misty, when she passed away, older dog. Beezer, older dog. Midnight had a tumor behind his heart. And he was probably about 10 years old. He was taken from us very suddenly, very painfully, but he was 10 years old. Our boy Gunny was 12 when he was taken. Our girl Molly, who we lost in July, that we put down, she was an older girl. She was probably about 12 or 13. So the point is, all these dogs were older dogs. Snappy was not yet 5 years old. 5! Which if you use that chart, 7 years for every year with a dog, so he's 35 years old. And now he's dead. My daughter thought at first that maybe he'd gotten into something, some kind of poison or had some sort of. She wanted us to rush Roscoe to the vet to make sure that Roscoe was okay. So we drove Roscoe all the way to her animal hospital, which is about a 45-minute drive, and they did the, specs on Roscoe, and they said, oh, he's fine. So, okay, it wasn't that. And after some conversations with some veterinary staff, the veterinarians, my daughter and her husband, bless them, had come and picked up Snap. And University of Georgia has a very renowned and prestigious animal hospital. An animal, that's where kids go to college to become vets. UGA is like one of the number one schools in the country. So they have a pathology unit. They take them there and they did a scan, didn't find any issues. And so the belief was that Snap had an underlying heart condition. My vet, his vet, called me on Monday, 2 days later. He had heard the news, and I told him everything that happened, and he said, he goes, it sounds to me like Snap had a heart attack. And I go, he wasn't even 5 years old, Well, he had an underlying condition, and that's not something when you take your dog in and they do blood work or they, give him his immunity. They don't know that. Just like when my boy Midnight died, he had a tumor behind his heart. Nobody fucking knew that he had a tumor behind his heart. And that's kind of what happened to Snap. He had some sort of underlying heart condition. It was like Midnight's tumor. It was just this thing that was waiting there to pounce. This animal in a weed. In the weeds, waiting to pounce on my boy Snap. And my boy Snap, that day, he went to the front door because somebody was dropping a package off, and he wanted to protect me, and he was gone. So I asked my daughter, I said, I don't think I've ever had an animal die in front of me. And I went over the list of all the animals, and she said, well, I hate to tell you this, I don't think you have seen an animal die in front of you. I said, what do you mean? I think Snap was dead by the time you got to him. That little whimper that you heard, that was him leaving. So from the time it took for me to take Roscoe to the door, 20 feet, maybe a couple feet more, and walk back to the front door, he was already gone. So I've had animals die in front of me, euthanasia, that kind of thing. But I've never had an animal drop dead in front of me. And my daughter said, you still haven't. Because while you walked to take Roscoe outside, he was already gone. So, with the help of the vet, we were able to put him in a blanket. We carried him out to the garage. But my daughter says, put him someplace that's relatively cool, and we'll come pick him up. And that's when I called you, Barry. Very painful phone call. I can't even remember if I cried. I'm sure I did.
You did.
And they took my boy away, my daughter and her husband. And then after that, he was passed on to a local facility that handles cremation. And then a few days later, my boy came home to me for the last time. In a beautiful wooden urn with his ashes. And I've always told my wife that when I go, when it's my time, I want to be cremated. Because I don't want somebody to feel compelled to come visit a headstone, you know. I don't want a headstone that gets overgrown with grass and forgotten. I want to be cremated. My plan had always been, I told Kim, when that time comes, I want you to put me and my boy Gunny, I want you to combine our ashes and then spread them so that we're together. Always. Well, now, Barry, there'll be one more boy joining me on that journey. My boy Snappy will join his dad, or his father, Gunny, and me, his dad. And we're going to walk into the great beyond all together. And hopefully when I get there, I'll walk across that rainbow bridge and I'll see all my other boys and girls, and they'll be waiting for me. And hopefully Kim will join us. She better join afterwards. I told her, if you leave before me, I'm going to kick you right in the crotch. So, Barry, do you have a beverage there? Snappy, I love you, my boy, and I'll miss you forever. So now, we've gotten past Snappy. You know, Kim and I had talked because she volunteered and because the facility that she volunteers at, I had volunteered at for a while, about over a year. And, you know, there's always dogs when you volunteer. You're like, well, you know, if only I could take this one dog, because this is such a great dog, you know. And then the dog would get adopted. And you'd be like, oh, that's great, you know. I love the fact that dog got adopted. So Kim and I had our eyes on a couple of dogs, and we were thinking, you know, Christmas time comes up. That dog is still there. We're going to have a serious conversation about whether or not we want to get a third dog to join Snap and Roscoe. And we had our eye on this kind of smaller female. Her name was JoJo. JoJo is a very passive dog, you know, as far as, you know, she's not like overly aggressive and stuff like that. And when she was in a play group, she would play well with other dogs, wouldn't be aggressive, nothing like that. So Thanksgiving came, and right over, I think over Thanksgiving weekend, we got the word that JoJo got adopted. And I was so happy for JoJo. And then I told my wife, I said, well, there's only one left. that we've really talked about. And my wife said, well, yeah, but there's that one problem. And the one problem is this dog is very toy possessive. Well, guess who else was very toy possessive? Yes, my boy Snap was the ultimate hoarder of dog toys. Is Ozzy like a good dog toy, Bear?
Oh God, yeah. We have a whole basket full of toys over there.
So does he prefer the soft plush toys or the harder bones to chew on? Which ones do you like best?
He likes the soft plush toys, which he generally can completely eviscerate within minutes.
Yes, okay, yes. My boy Snappy was like that too. So this dog that we had looked at was great in play groups, but was toy possessive, and we were very concerned that if we brought this dog home and then this particular dog wanted a toy that Snap had, there would be what we would call a kerfluffle. And we didn't want to have kerfluffles. Well, now Snappy's out of the picture, and we want to see whether or not now this dog would be something that would be of interest to us. This dog, Barry, had been at the facility for approximately 430 days at the Humane Society. Let me put in these terms. Imagine you're a dog in a facility, okay? You're surrounded by 25, 30 other dogs. So there's this cacophony of noise from barking. Maybe you've just fallen asleep and some dog next to you wakes up, and now you're awake again, and then all the other dogs wake up again. So now your sleep is completely interrupted. And then you go and you fall asleep again, and then the dog that's across from you starts barking for no random reason because they're dogs, okay? And they're in this facility, and they've got this kennel, and they've got this bed that's like got a rubber mat, okay? So it's not like you're sleeping on a pillow or anything like that. If you get a toy, because they're worried that you might choke on a toy, so you get these hard bones only to chew on. You don't have any sort of, some dogs, they get a blanket, some don't, because the dogs either pee on the blankets or they start, because they're stressed, they start chewing on the blanket and they rip up the blanket. All this is going on for 430 days. Not only that, every dog in the facility but you has gone home. They've all been rotated out. New dogs rotate in. Meanwhile, you're still sitting there. What did I do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong. You're a highly energetic dog that gets excited when you go out for a walk. When you go in play groups, you're fine. You get along with other dogs. You're a 3-year-old dog that got dumped at the Humane Society over the fence. Someone dropped you in a year and a half ago. Who knows why? And we've talked about it. It's a scuzzy thing to do, to dump your dog. But if you're going to dump your dog, getting past the whole you're an asshole thing, at least you're dropping the dog off at some place where the dog's going to be taken care of. As opposed to Roscoe, who was dumped in a ditch. So we bring Roscoe out, and Roscoe has the meet and greet. The behavioral specialist at the facility is watching their interaction, making sure there's no kerfluffles. They're getting along. And she tells me, she goes, I think she really likes Roscoe a lot. Roscoe, of course, is in a strange environment, doesn't know what's going on. And he's kind of like, whoa, whoa. It's like you back in the old days, Barry, when you were in a bar and all the women would come towards you and you'd have to go, whoa. I know you remember those days, Barry.
Miss those days.
Yeah, exactly. So it was the meet and greet was a success. Kim and I went home. A couple days later, we went and we did what they call at the facility a foster to adopt, which is basically you're taking the dog for a 2-week period to decide whether or not you're going to keep this dog or bring the dog back. Now imagine, let me go a little rant here for just a second. Imagine if you're a dog and you get fostered out for a week, 10 days, whatever. You're loving the house. You've got another dog. You're playing like that. And then the people decide, for whatever reason, ah, we really don't want you. They bring you back. The hell are you supposed to think? And the reason I bring that up is there was one specific dog I remember that happened to. The dog got brought back, and the dog shut down. The dog got very aggressive towards the staff. And they ended up having to euthanize the dog, which completely fucking sucks. Excuse me for saying that, but it does. So we fostered to adopt this dog, brought it home, and, messed on the carpet once or twice. Dealing with that, knock on wood, that situation's improved greatly. Minor issues with the cat, because, you always got to see whether or not they're going to go after the cat. Is it going after the cat in a playful manner, or is it going after the cat in a predatory manner? There's another dog that's at the facility that's been there a long time, just celebrated their 1 year anniversary, which sucks. But part of the problem with that dog is that when they're around a cat, they've shown predatory instincts. And if you have a cat, obviously, you don't want that. So that's part of the reason why that dog is there. But we didn't know that about our dog, the new dog. And so when she began interacting with our cat, the cat occasionally gave her the swat across the nose, let her know boundaries and stuff like that. But gradually, things have been getting a little better. First couple of nights, we put her in the office behind a gate because she's used to being in a kennel. She's used to being in an area that's enclosed. And then gradually what happened was we said, well, let's see what happens if we let her in our room at night. Will she sleep on the ottoman? Will she come up in the bed, sleep at the foot of our bed? Well, the first night we did that, trying to go to sleep, and she's engaging in playtime with the cat. So we had to put her back in the office and put her behind the gate. And then we had, you have to do babies. You have to get her used to, okay, if I stay up to read, is she going to react to me being in the living room when she knows that the lights are on and the lights in the bedroom are off? Or does she need a completely dark house before she lays down? And, all these things, it's a learning process, people. Remember, Barry, I think I've told you about this, the 3-3-3 rule as a pet owner, when you get an animal. 3 days for them to de-stress, 3 weeks for them to get used to your routine in the house, and 3 months before they realize that they're home. And so Kim and I, after a week, Kim was talking to somebody and said, well, it's another week before our foster adopt period is up, and, we have to decide whether we're going to keep her or not. Kim got off the phone and I said, decide if we're going to keep her. We're not taking this dog back. This dog is home. And she said, I know. I'm not going to take a dog that's been in a facility for 430 effing days, keep her for 10 days or 2 weeks, and then bring her back. Because that dog would completely shut down. Whether it's just they don't want to eat, they don't want to have any action, or like the dog I described, they become aggressive and start biting. So we called them up and we said, we're not bringing her back. She's ours. So, Barry, you've seen the pictures. Our new girl, Waffle. And this is a dog that, because she was there so long, when I volunteered at that particular facility, I knew her. She knew me. The day I brought Roscoe there, the behavioral specialist saw her interacting with me and said, she remembers you. And it had been almost 4 months since I'd been there. She said, she remembers you. And Waffle is a part of our life now. She's such a sweet dog. And she and Roscoe, they roughhouse just like Snappy and Roscoe used to. They go out in the backyard and chase each other around. It's good for Roscoe because, here's another thing as we begin to wrap up here, We're hitting the hour point. It wasn't just Kim and I that had to deal with the loss of Snap. Roscoe lost his brother. His brother, we've had Roscoe a little over 2 years. So his brother of 2 years all of a sudden wasn't there. And when Snap was laying there, we had Roscoe come over and do the sniffing because we wanted Roscoe to understand. And Roscoe, for the 2 or 3 days afterwards, I mean, he was just, you could see he was miserable. I would go out to where Roscoe was laying on a dog bed, and I'd start playing with him and wrestling him. And whenever I would do that, Snap was very jealous and would come running out and say, "Hey, it's my dad. I wrestle with him. You can't," and was very jealous. And so a couple of days afterwards, I was playing with him and roughhousing with this before we got Waffle. And Roscoe jumped up and looked down the hallway as he was waiting for Snap to come out. He was waiting for Snap to come out and say, "Hey, that's my dad. You can't wrestle with him. I'm supposed to." And one of the saddest things about this is I said, "Roscoe, he's not there, buddy. He's gone." I talk to my dogs every night. I've told you that, Barry. I talk to Gunny. I talk to the other ones. Say goodnight. And when I talk to Snap, I say, "You weren't supposed to go. You were supposed to grow old with me." I mean, I figured Roscoe and Snap were probably going to be our last dogs. I mean, I hate to say that. When you're 64 years old, you start thinking about those kind of things. Barry, you got any intention on getting a dog after Ozzy leaves or no?
Yeah, so that was something I thought about, and I this was years ago, and I think my initial thought was I don't know if I would ever get another dog. And then every time I take Ozzy to the groomer and I come back home, there is an eerie silence in the house. You don't hear the nails on the floor, you don't hear the walking, you don't hear the barking, and I hated that silence. And I really started to think about it. I know that I will never have another relationship with a dog to the relationship that I have with Ozzy. I am very much aware of that. But it also doesn't mean that I want to shut myself off from a different type of love with another dog. While that relationship may change, I know that I can love again and I will get another dog. It won't be Ozzy. I know that. But
Yeah.
at the same token, I as you are a dog person, Jeff, I am a dog person. I can't go without a dog.
I told Kim a couple of nights ago when I was talking about him. I said when we got Snap, as an owner, you want that new dog to be just like the old dog, to have those
Right.
same kind of quirks, personality traits, whatever. And I said, I expected Snap to be Gunny. I expected Gunny to be Midnight. I expected Midnight and our other dog Beezer. I expected them to be Misty, our Aussie Shepherd that I had with my ex-wife. I expected Misty, to be like my first dog, Lady. Every dog I got, I expected him to be like the dog that I had lost, and that doesn't happen. But as Barry just said, that doesn't mean that you can't adopt an animal and love them in a different way. And we got Waffle. She's got her own little personality. And, sometimes it's funny because she's much smaller than Roscoe, but she overwhelms him with her personality sometimes. You can just see Roscoe going, "Would you please leave me alone?" Uh, you know, and Roscoe, he's our quirky boy. Sometimes Roscoe wants to be super affectionate. Sometimes Roscoe's like, don't bother me. But Waffle's fitting into our house. And I would encourage you, Barry, and encourage everyone else when that time comes, please, please go to an animal shelter, go to your local humane society. Tell them that you're interested in a pet, and you will get unconditional love like you've never experienced before. And as we wrap up, I would say just remember what my daughter said. Have a plan. Know where your local 24-hour animal hospital is. Have a relationship with your veterinarian about your dog's health. And also have an afterlife plan for your dog, whether or not you are going to have just the I hate to say the carcass, the body removed, whether or not you're going to have them cremated so that you can have their ashes. These are all conversations that you want to have with yourself or with your spouse or with your partner or whatever, so that when the time comes, you don't sit there and say, holy shit, what am I doing? If I had been by myself, if Kim had not, if she had already left for the Humane Society, I would have completely melted down. More than I did already. If my daughter did not work for an animal hospital, I would not have known about all these different things. I would have been at a loss. Well, what happened? What do I do with my animal? These are questions that you need to answer for yourself before it's too late. I would encourage you to do that. Now, on that note, time to wrap up the show. I appreciate you all listening to my stories of my boy who I miss so much, my snappy boy. And I hope you will join me in welcoming our new girl, Waffle, who's quite the character. Barry Rose, one last time. To unconditional love from your dog or your pet, salute. Barry Rose, until next time, my brother.